friends, what is up? How are you? I have not been on the bike in almost 2 weeks. Had a bad cold, so just couldn't shake it. I was coughing like crazy. But I'm back, and I'm just heading into Old Settlers Park here in Round Rock, Texas. This pops out onto Route 79, which is my destination, is Dell Diamond Baseball Stadium, where this past weekend was the police rodeo. Alright, so here we are at Dell Diamond. Let me just turn into the parking lot here. This is a great place to practice, I gotta see. Unless there's a game going on, these gates are always open, and it pretty much looks like this. A lot of parents bring their kids here to learn how to drive. You can see all the red outline marks on the ground. Those were all where cone markers were. So I'm doing some little donuts right now. Whee! Head and eyes, head and eyes. So here's the Dell Diamond. Let me just kind of pull over here. Put the Dell Diamond in the background. Alright, so the reason I came here is I did want to see what was left on the ground after the rodeo. But I was fortunate enough to have a nice interview with police rodeo champion Quinn Reaker. He was nice enough to sit down with me for, gosh, we talked for about 30 minutes, I think. And I was going to include that in the overall video. But what I did is I chose to break these videos into two. So one video is going to be the overall kind of rodeo itself. I did some aerial shots. I just walked around and filmed. I kind of met a couple people and interviewed a few nice people. That'll be one video. And then because Quinn's video was quite long and full of some cool wisdom, I thought it would be best to kind of separate those out, and that's what I'm going to do. So I hope you enjoy this interview I did with Quinn. Again, thanks so much, Quinn, for taking the time to talk with me. That was awesome. It was really fun talking to you. So anyways, enjoy the interview. All right, friends, we have a special guest here, Quinn Reaker from BMW, but he's got a police connection here. Quinn, how's it going?
Good, buddy. Nice to see you.
There's the handshake. So tell us about your kind of brief history.
Yeah, sure. So I'm out of Southern California, born and raised there. Grew up riding dirt bikes, racing dirt bikes. So motocross is my primary background as far as motorcycles go. And for a lot of these other motor cops, dirt bikes, off-road, desert racing, same thing. So we all kind of chewed a lot of the same dirt as little boys. Got into racing, and in my teens and 20s and 30s, that sort of broke into some trial stuff, some dirt track stuff, some road track, all that kind of stuff. And then I became a motor officer because I became a police officer, not really with the intention of riding motorcycles. It was for a whole other really sort of reason for getting into law enforcement. But at some point, somebody said, hey, we understand you ride motorcycles. You ought to put in for the motor unit. I got to know some of the guys, super good guys. So I put in, and shortly thereafter becoming a motor officer, I found out they do these motor competitions around the country, and at least around the state of California. And I thought, wow, that's great. So I'm working as a cop, and I can go compete as a racer like I did when I was younger. Like, it's great. I'm killing two birds, kind of eating two passions that I like and melding them together. So I started going to these police rodeos throughout the western U.S. And for whatever bizarre reason, all my eclectic riding background really gelled with a big, heavy motorcycle, manipulating it in these tight pretzel-like patterns. And I started doing very, very well. And so my agency supported that, and I started doing probably about 15 a year.
How's that? Let me just ask you a question related to that. Now you mentioned riding dirt and motocross, all that. I would assume that has a lot to do with your ability to be so good here because of like the counterbalancing type of steering that motocross does. Is that true?
I think that's true. You'll see a lot of guys. Here's the rub with that though, is the way that you're taught to ride in a police motor school really doesn't call upon any of the off-road technique stuff. And law enforcement riding is very, very different when it comes to the clutch. That's where things are very different, the way that they utilize the clutch. And in short, what I'm talking about is Most people look at the throttle as the way to modulate power to the motorcycle. We go and stop with the throttle, or go and slow. Law enforcement, we think about it more like we set and forget the throttle, and we use the clutch to be that bridge between power from the motor and moving it into the rear end. That's not an absolute, but that's kind of idea-wise how we ride a little bit different. So we're very adept with the clutch control. That's, in my experience, the only thing that's even remotely similar is maybe trials riding. Other than that, people usually use a clutch like a light switch. It's either in or it's out. And that's okay, but so law enforcement's fundamentally different in that way. And then also, off-road, there's a lot of, you're up off your butt, off the seat, you're using your feet, you're pushing with your legs. That's not something law enforcement teaches or really, requests of a rider. So over the years, yes, I started employing those things, and they did help. They help and hurt in certain ways. And it's a rabbit hole conversation. We need some cocktails for me to walk you through it, but there's some benefits and some negatives to riding it like an off-road guy. You have to really figure out other aspects of your process to compensate for the downsides and ultimately benefit. But I think one of the big things that's helped me over the years, I also grew up as a drummer since I was little. About 7, I started playing drums. So I'm pretty ambidextrous, I'm pretty coordinated, and I think when it comes to this type of stuff, you've got a lot of little things going on. I do a lot of overlapping of my controls. I trail brake, I'm counterbalancing, I'm watching wheel placement, my clutch control, my throttle control, using my legs, using the friction zone with the clutch in different amounts to help the motorcycle pick itself up. So there's a lot of little pieces like that, and I think
all those fine-tuning correction point inputs.
Yeah, and there's so much of that is muscle memory, but then it's a timing, it's a rhythm. So I think for me, it's some bizarre sort of lottery win, all my weird stuff kind of converged to make me strangely good at this. And I've been, I did it for about 5.5 years. I ended up getting a deal with, BMW called me and said, hey, we'd like you to be our brand ambassador. I write a column in Rider magazine. It's called Motor School with Quinn Reaker.
So when did you actually retire?
I retired about a little over a year ago.
Oh, okay.
And that was when BMW said, hey, we'd like you to work with us. Historically, the brand ambassador role in any of these rodeos is you're a facilitator. You show up, you set up your booth, your bike's here. If any of the motor officers want to try it out or ask questions, you can give them a brochure. My thing was different. I said, look, if I'm going to go, I want to compete again. I want to put on clinics, but I want to try to win some hardware and get better and challenge myself. So to me, the fun of being in the role as a brand ambassador for BMW is to be out with the motors, hang out with them, banter with them, get to know them, and drop the bike and challenge myself and get sweaty and get angry and swear and try to figure this stuff out. Like, that's the journey, right? It's not about winning or losing. It's about putting yourself out there and growing. And I still said, well, if I'm going to be the brand ambassador, I still want that opportunity. So they were super gracious with me and said, absolutely. So luckily, BMW lets me have this motorcycle. They support the bike. It's their bike, but I do clinics with it. I do demonstrations with it. In my motorcycle column with Rider magazine, all of our photo shoots, I'm riding that bike or it's in the shot. So it kind of supports everything that I'm doing, which is great.
And you said you do some clinics and some teaching, and so you have a website.
Yeah, so policemotortraining.com is my website. And if you go to policemotortraining.com, there are videos, there are training notes, because the way I like to learn is I'll come up with some idea in my silly little brain, and I'll think about it, think on it, and I'll practice it, and I'll take notes. I take painter's tape and white piece of paper, and I put it on my tank, and I make notes. Well, and my litmus test when I get better, when I practice, is 3 things. What does it look like from a POV on my bike? What does it feel like from the seat of the pants? And what does the motor sound like when I'm doing it? And I just do slow figure 8s. And I do it ad nauseum until I can get some repeatability and find out, this is what I'm doing, this is what it looks like, feels like, sounds like, and I take notes. Then once I have that really condensed and I can speak on it and I could teach someone on it, then I make a training video, then I make training notes. Here's how you work on it. Here's what it should look like, sound like, feel like. Here's what it shouldn't look like, sound like, feel like. And that's all free. So a lot of these motor officers, it's great because sometimes I'll travel somewhere, I don't know these guys, and they'll come up to me and say, hey man, I really appreciate it. I watch your videos. This is my first rodeo. And I have videos on here's how you approach a rodeo. Here's notes on kind of how to deconstruct a pattern, all that type of stuff. So that's one component. With policemotortraining.com, a lot of guys just print up my training notes, watch my videos, and that's that. I have Zoom training also, and what that is a lot of my, what I call foundational skill sets. Watch the video, work on the notes, and then film yourself doing slow figure eights, about 2 to 5 minutes. Send that to me, and then for $50 per session, and a session could be anywhere from 20 minutes to 2 hours, you send me your video, I'll organize a Zoom session, I'll share my screen, and we'll sit and watch second by second by second. What are you doing? What does it look like? What does it sound like? What does it feel like? And it's pretty easy. In fact, with a lot of the law enforcement stuff, I can close my eyes and listen to you ride and help you just by what it sounds like. And so that's been great. I have guys, I'll do Zoom sessions, guys out of Dubai, Germany, Australia, Japan, Germany, Canada, and in Mexico. And so it's a nice way for me to interact with them, train with them, work with them, and give them some meaningful feedback.
Yeah.
So it's been great.
I've seen some videos online from Japan, and I haven't seen all of the videos they have, obviously, but I've seen the ones that they just go incredibly fast. Zoom and then turn, and zoom and turn, and zoom and turn.
Yeah. You're probably thinking of the Moto Gymkhana stuff.
Okay.
So
that's different than this.
Yeah. So it's different in a couple ways, and I'll tell you. So in Japan, the motor officers, if you go to a motor school in Japan, and really even getting a motorcycle license, you have to go through by CCs. You can't just jump on a 1,000 cc race bike and go get your license.
Yeah.
You have to work your way through. It takes you years. If you see some Japanese rider in Japan on a big, heavy, high displacement bike, that guy's been riding a long time. He's taken many, many, many tests. The motor officers have to go through a series of on-road, off-road trials, and that birthed what's called Moto Gymkhana. And the idea with that is it's sort of a hybrid of what we do. Their motorcycles are smaller. They're like 750cc, more like sport tourer model bikes, Honda VFRs, things like that. They don't ride as tight a patterns as us, so they do not use the clutch like we do. If you watch those closely, you'll see they don't even touch the clutch the whole time. They're not going slow enough to do that. Don't get me wrong, they're amazing riders for sure, but it's a little bit different. The bikes are lighter, the courses are faster. They tend to stay right in the seat, but they zip really, really fast. Really good. And it's a nice mix of higher speed and tight, slow speed. This type of stuff is really just speaking to tight, big, heavy bikes, full lock, cranked over, going tight and slow through a tight set of cones. A lot of agencies will have a combination of this and what we call an EVOC course or a pursuit course, and they have to click through the gears and get going fast also, because that's more real world. This is really to get your skills, your reference points, get that better, and it's easier logistically than, you don't want guys, there's 100 guys trying to win a trophy, you don't want them to go on 120 miles an hour, right? So
How many of these events are there in America approximately? Is there a lot of them, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna just ballpark it, but I'd say there's easily 50 to 100
regional events around.
Yeah, so in any given state, there's probably not any given state, but California, I'd say there's probably 6 or 7. Texas, 6 or 7. Florida's got quite a few. Virginia's got quite a few. So regionally in that way, the East Coast, I'd say easy 50 or more. And most of them are law enforcement only. I'm retired, so I get some are law enforcement and retired law enforcement. Most of them, though, are just sworn current law enforcement. A few are also civilian. I'm going to one in a couple months. It's called Nova, and it's out in Virginia. and it's a combination sworn and civilian, which to me is a lot of fun. I love riding with the civilians because they're not doing it because their agency said, hey, you need to get more proficient, this is what you do for work. They're just 100% passion. They really care about it, and they, guess what, tend to be pretty damn good at it too, because it's completely optional for the civilian riders. So,
so their heart's totally into it.
Yeah, their heart's into it, and they're here, and it's all good. Like, no egos. They just want to ride, learn, and get better, and share that. So, I love that. You know, I wish there were more.
I heard there was close to over 100 riders at this event.
Yeah, there's over 100 here.
So it's decent size. And I was talking to an officer the other day. I was here during practice, and one of them was saying that, as I'd mentioned, some of the cities around us here and across the nation have like disbanded, or they just got rid of their moto units for liability reasons, for interest. And one of the officers told me where he was from, it was just a lack of interest in, you know, some of the newer officers coming in. They're just not interested in being on a bike. Is that something you're finding, or not really?
To speak on that, I would say it's a combination of things. I think one of the big challenges with departments is deployment altogether. Law enforcement deployment. You could talk to any just patrol cop and say, how are you guys doing on deployment? And they'll probably tell you, man, this is my third overtime shift this week or this pay period. And at the end of the day, motors are optional. Yes, it's a traffic safety role, but they're cops first, motor cops second. So if deployment's low, they're going to get you off the bike because they need you in a patrol car. So there's that piece. The second piece, liability, I would say is probably further down the rung of the why, based on motorcycle cops being off. Yes, that's the case in some places, but I would say, the interest is probably a little lower, and I think that ebbs and flows a bit. But motorcycle riding is dangerous. I can tell you, growing up riding street bikes in the 80s when I was a kid, there were no cell phones, there were no automated vehicles driving themselves. And now, when I got on as a motor cop riding in like 2010, 12, you notice, and I'm sure you could speak to this, not just as a motorcycle rider, but do you guys think about this. Remember back, say, in the 80s or 90s, you're driving your car, and you'd see a car weave a little bit, and you'd be like, oh, a drunk driver. And it's like, oh no. Now you see that, and you're like, oh, they're on their cell phone, or they're texting, and there's less worry, because, you know, they're probably going to get their head back in the game any moment, and usually they do, they correct themselves. It's not a drunk driver, it's just somebody has, inattentive driver, which is equally dangerous.
Sure.
But as a motor cop, when your head's on the swivel looking for violations and you're riding day in and day out on the bike, I mean, you see so much of that. So I do think there are people that didn't grow up riding that look around and say, well, what do I gain by being on a bike? I'm gonna get sunburns, I'm gonna smell like gasoline by the end of the day, I might get hit and killed. I can say, as a motor cop, once a week, I wouldn't say I had a close call, but had I not taken evasive action, and shame on me if I'm not paying attention, so you don't want to get caught off guard, but I'd say at least once a week, if I would have just continued on with whatever my right of way was, I would have got very injured or killed,
Yeah.
So that's not great.
No.
Right?
I've been riding around here in Texas on these roads. I mean, it's any city area. There's like you said, drivers not paying attention, or they can't see you. I ride like everything's going to go bad at every intersection. So I've got my head on a swivel. I watch tires. I watch movement. And one thing I do is I stay. People say stay away from cars. Make your own little pocket, which is great in certain circumstances. But when I come to an intersection, I like, especially if it's getting dark out, I like to go through the intersection with a team of people, and cars being near me. So it's a big mass of metal going in one direction, and most likely that car is not going to pull left out in front of us. But if I'm by myself and you're just riding down that road and it's a 2-lane road or something, and someone's going to turn left in front of you, and you just got that one headlight, that's it.
Well, speaking on clearing intersections, especially at night, as a rule, one of the things I like to do is, if I'm going down a road, if there's any other traffic, say I'm passing cars or somebody's passing me, I will parallel them just to clear the intersection. At least I have a blocker on one side.
I always equate it to football. And and I've got my defensive guys in front of me, and they're running interference for me.
And I would
through
say
the intersection.
If that conversation's happening in your head as a rider, you're a safe rider, because the fact that you're even asking, hey, this might work, those what ifs are valuable. But think about this for a second, because as a civilian rider, your role is to pay attention to what's going on around you, that safety bubble, right? Now you're a police officer. So as a motor cop, now instead of just worrying about you, you're looking for violators. So now your attention is not 100% here. Now you're also listening to the radio. You're listening to all the patrol cops in the city, because guess what? If something crazy happens, who's the first one that can get there? It's you. You can get anywhere in your city faster than any car. You know every shortcut, you can get through traffic, you can ride through sidewalks, over lawns, railroad tracks, it doesn't matter. Motor cops can get anywhere sooner than anybody. So you're the best first responder. But when you put all that in play, the motor cop is in a very precarious situation, far more than it just appears as they're rolling down the street and you're thinking about it as a regular civilian motorcycle rider. That guy's got 3 things going on in his head at any given time, and he's a vulnerable motorcycle rolling down the road where cars are going to turn into him. So it's definitely a sketchy, if you aren't riding 100%, not even thinking about what you're doing, you're a danger to yourself. I don't ride a motorcycle wondering about any of the physical aspects of riding. That's all autopilot.
Yeah, that's autopilot.
My brain needs to be on all the other 8
Muscle
things.
memory, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where an event like this, I think, really does help you, because your dexterity and just this has to be, again, I'm not really thinking about what I'm doing in these patterns. I worked that out. Now I'm just hitting the switch, and go. And I can talk to you, and we can talk about other things while I'm going through the cones,
sure.
Because that needs to be automatic.
Yeah, I find it's kind of like meditative, not meaning meditation in that you're zoning out. It's more that you're zoning in your daily life. You're thinking about bills and all kinds of other things. And once you get on the bike, everything, if you're a good rider, a safe rider, everything is focused on your ride and being safe. And it just really hones you into that moment. And I think it's one of the reasons why a lot of people, let's say, get proficient. They really enjoy just getting on a bike by themselves and going even for a 30-minute ride just to clear the what we call the wind therapy or something like that. That's awesome.
And that's one of the things I do like about the tight cone stuff. Forget about the cones. You can go to any, like I do supermoto riding also, track stuff. Tracks are 2 hours away. Tires are $400 a set. It's $150 to get on the track. So there's a lot of money and time. But I can hop on my police bike, go to any parking lot, and just do some figure eights and work on that smooth handoff of clutch, throttle, brake, balance, control, and find that sort of zen place all in the space of, a couple parking stalls, and get my yayas out in 20-30 minutes, get a nice little sweat going, and then I'm 2 blocks from home.
Yeah. And
I can move on about my day. So I love that about it. The access, both financially and logistically, is just great,
I actually use this. I live down the street, so I do come here and I practice. I don't practice as much as I should.
Nobody does. Nobody does.
My intention was, just being able to get my bike to get a decent tight U-turn that's a real life situation when you're going down a road. You say, I need a U-turn, or I'm at a dead end, and how do I get out of here? And if you can't U-turn, you're gonna, do the Austin Powers,
right.
multiple K turns to get your bike around, or get off of it and kind of muscle it around. So I do come here and I use the spaces.
Yeah.
I do figure eights, I do donuts and all that stuff. But I practice more than others, but not as much as someone should.
The thing about that to me is all of this stuff is optional,
Yep.
And the one thing I'm a big how do I put this? Well, I'm a fan of is riding, whatever your level is, enjoy it, because the better you get, it's not more fun. Fun is a choice,
Yep.
Some people think, man, I got to ride more. Like, but why? It's all optional. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the process of learning. And wherever you are on that hill, just celebrate it, man. Because I don't want to say it doesn't matter. The better you get, the safer you are, for sure, and that's great. So training is fantastic. But I don't know if you've ever had this experience when you've gone to a training and you learned all this really cool, crazy stuff, and you go home and all you've really done is educated yourself on how much you suck and how much you don't know and how bad you are. And then you just feel like, man, and you leave not having felt like you gained something, but like you almost lost something. It's like, man, this sucks. I got to climb that mountain. Now I got to quit my job and move to Tibet and start changing my diet. And well, I'd like to close with this. First of all, I enjoyed chatting with you. It was cool.
Yeah, it's good.
But I'd like to just say that you can do all the training in the world, learn as much as you want, and be the best rider in the world. But if you don't exercise good judgment, none of it matters. And conversely, you don't have to be the best rider in the world to manage a sketchy situation, as long as you use good judgment. Like, don't ride over your head. Always, I know more motor officers that have never had any issues, that if you were to watch them in here, you'd be like, man, that person's mediocre at best. But they're very, very cognizant of that they're mediocre, and they don't push themselves to a bad place or ride over their head or think they're, on a scale of 1 to 10, they're a 10 and ride at a 10. They tone it down a little bit. So that's one thing I will just say is, I work to be a good rider, but I don't ride aggressive. I don't ride greedy. I don't try and hang it out. Just, it's safety first, right? So.
Yeah, safety. I just thought about something we were talking about before, and I know some people don't know this because I made a video and talked about it, but a lot of insurance companies will give you a discount on your car insurance if you have a motorcycle endorsement, and I think they equate that to, if you're a motorcycle rider, you're really focused on riding. And I know that once I got my license and got in the car, I was checking my side mirrors constantly. Muscle memory again. Rearview mirror, where's everybody around me? And that's something a lot of drivers just don't. They just go on autopilot, and I'm going to the store and I just drive. Right. They don't think about it.
Well, and they have a cage too, so they're not going to pay if we don't, like we will.
And then the last couple of things before we head out here. Before we were looking at your front tire,
yes.
and there's some bulging there that you could feel. I don't know if you could see it on the video, as a result of being in that locked position. What do you have what do you run your tires at? Is that a proprietary secret?
No, not at all, not at all. So here's the deal: when you want to go lock, tight, leaned over stuff, the more tire pressure you have, the lighter the bike is on its feet, because you have less tire contact pads, right? The downside, of course, is you have less tire contact pads, so you can slide easier, less grip, right? So it's a trade-off. It really depends on the surface you're going to find yourself in. In my experience with this type of riding, I tend to just leave it stock.
Like 36 front, 42 back, or something like that?
Yeah, and if it's grippy, I might even go 40, 45. I also find for practice, I'll even go 45, 45. And the reason is, if I have less contact pads, the tires, especially the front, tends to last longer. I don't eat it up so quickly.
Oh, so you go a little bit more on the front.
I'll overinflate it a little bit.
Okay.
Keep in mind, that's parking lot tire pressures. That's not, if I'm going to go on a road ride or I'm going to go
Regular
commuting
riding.
or something, OEM's good. It's a good compromise between making the bike flickable and still giving me good traction. This is a pretty greasy surface, so I dropped it down to 30, 35. 30 front, 35 rear. And it slowed the steering down a little bit. This particular pattern, there weren't too many transitions, back, forth.
So you wanted a little bit more grip because of the oil?
I was willing to try and see, maybe I can afford to get more grip. But I played around with 28, 25, and the thing's blinking. Park this bike, you're going to kill yourself. The tires need, you're running out of air. And whatever I gained in traction, I lost in going through molasses trying to get the bike to change direction. So,
makes sense.
Yeah, so people ask me that, and really the easy answer is, believe it or not, leave it stock. It's pretty good traction. It's pretty flickable side to side. And you don't have to worry about, I'm going to go train. Oh, no, I need to go get a quart of milk on the bike or whatever. It's always safe for whatever you're doing. So I like that about it. I kind of just set it and forget it and monitor it with the computer. I don't have to screw with it. I did play around with it today. Kind of to no avail, to be honest.
Yeah, I got a little bit of your ride. Unfortunately, I showed up too late. And part of that ride is on the other side of the parking lot, so you're like a little tiny guy cruising around.
What is that? Yeah.
All right, Quinn. Well, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Awesome, and I'll put your website on there, and people can visit.
Any of your viewers have any questions, motorcycle stuff or other, you know, I'm easily accessible and ask whatever questions and stuff. Okay.
All right. Thanks again.
All right,
man.
buddy. Take care.
All right, very cool. I hope you enjoyed that and you made it through the entire interview. Please do subscribe to the channel if you haven't. That really helped me out. And check out Quinn's website. It's linked below in the description area. And again, thanks so much to Quinn for doing that. All right, well, thanks a lot. Again, subscribe, thumbs up, dingleberry thing, and all that wonderful stuff. Appreciate it, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks. All right, let's get out of here.